I just did an entire video and didn't record it. But anyways, the hi folks. The topic today I want to get at is me being a whiny little bitch, and I don't. I know I'm suggesting that there's a lot of terrible things that have been done to me and to other adoptees, and I don't want to come across as if we have not been given a there hasn't been a bit of justice that goes along with it. I mean, for every negative, there's a positive, and I guess we could use the allegory of Conan the Barbarian being strapped to that wheel that he walked around and became a huge muscle man. The adoptee is carrying an extra load, and with that extra load, maybe we develop some more character. In trying to find our place in the world, which is probably a bit more of a struggle, that perhaps we develop, different avenues that and more numerous avenues in our lives than other people, at least is my suspicion. And I guess the thing is that I don't want to assign victimhood to our entire populace as adoptees. Adoption, the practice, is wrong. It's malevolent. It's being done for malevolent purposes. There's terrible atrocities. There's people being hurt, murdered, abused, and not only by the individual adoptive parents, but by the governments at large for the purpose of driving the economy, creating consumers, addicts, etc., etc. It's not like freemium gaming invented the wheel when it comes to creating addicts. But anyways, I guess the point I want to make is that the dysfunction that comes from the illogic and the poor reasoning skills that got us into this mess. So, I mean, we can go back to the 1850s and discover that, the powers that be didn't want women staying home and looking after the home and just one guy when they could, double up their workforce or slave force. So they could get the women out there, and then on top of that, they could indoctrinate the children and have complete control, which ultimately is kind of what it comes down to a small margin that don't conform, and those are more easily dealt with, and not to mention that they're monitored, so you can monitor these little miscreants right into adulthood and assign them and tag them with permanent file status so that they never gain a voice and don't rise to success and aren't able to maybe pursue scholarly study and whatnot and be heard because their voices may contain dissent. So ultimately, where do we go? So we look. I started this journey in the 70s, and I think a lot of us may have. I think there was a big adoption populace back then, and I guess the thing I want to say is that we have misplaced responsibility, right? So we basically have this scenario, whereas studies show that Wade versus Roe, I think it was, or Roe versus Wade, studies that show that children that grow up without fathers are going to be troublemakers and criminals and drug addicts and problem children, problem citizens. So what was the solution? Well, let's put them in a home where there's a mother and a father. But that's not that child's mother and father. All you're doing now is not only removing the father, you're removing the mother as well. So let's double up. on our dysfunction. Double it up, and then what are we doing as well? We're um, taking the child to place it in a place where it can be, hopefully will conform more, and let the mother finish off her indoctrination, so she will conform. And not only that, I mean, you got a trauma based situation, so you're going to create more consumerism to fill that hole that you've just created. Um, the responsibility is shifted where? To the adoptive parents? Well, they don't tell the adoptive parents about the extra responsibility that's going to come from a traumatized baby that's just been removed from its entire family. So certainly that extra responsibility doesn't go there. The responsibility of parenting may be there, but are they parenting in the proper way? Or are they parenting it to conform the child to a consumeristic attitude, which doesn't necessarily suit anyone, health-wise or intellectually or any of those things? So, so what have we done? We've created this responsibility that is never looked after. So the adoptee is saddled with that extra responsibility to deal with the pain and suffering that they're going to have to deal with on their own, because they certainly aren't told about it. I'm sure there may be some adoptees that end up in a great, you know, situation with or better situations, but I think that's few and far between, and that's not the purpose. So, um, what do we do with that? I mean, we're just compounding the problem continually, more and more and more and more. And the saddest part about it is that you would think that being a white person raised by white people um, would be better. And in a way, there's a I see that native adoptees here and all sorts of foreign adoptees of different racial backgrounds are now a popular thing. Well, why? Well, let's put it this way. For the adoptee, I think it's better than my situation, because when people see the family, they see that this is an adoptee. And and subconsciously subconsciously you know that, well, that might have been a person in a bad situation. They probably had some problems to get to the situation where they were with two white parents. Um, and maybe give that person a little bit of a break, a little bit of a, you know person probably had some struggles. Let's go a little easier on them. And I didn't get that. I blended in, right? And on top of all that, with the white adoption story, it's some sort of fairy tale, like, oh, that's so great, you lost your entire family, that's so great. Like, how do you not make that connection? Why is it so why is it so hard for people to make the connection that adoption means somebody lost their entire family? That's horrible. I can't think of any situation, unless the entire family was just the worst of the worst. But the problem is that that's not really the case with the majority of adoption. You know, it isn't. I've seen tons of videos where people are being taken out of their homes because of political reasoning and things like that. So I mean, it's a joke. Um, you're trying to hide your shame. Back in the 70s, it was shameful that the young daughter had a child out of wedlock. But what's done is done. So you're ashamed of your daughter, so you're going to pretend it didn't happen? That's not dealing with your problems, is it? It's not saying, okay, we had a situation. All right, we're going to deal with it as a family. No, you're a piece of shit, so you're going to try and hide the fact. You're going to send your daughter off somewhere to have that child, and bring her back, and she can keep her mouth shut because she shamed the family. Well, what kind of people are those? Sick, disgusting people. They're not spiritual. They're not Christian. It's not Christian at all. People make fucking mistakes. Don't hate the sin, hate or don't hate the sinner, hate the sin, or whatever they say. But regardless, the point I'm trying to make is that the point of my videos isn't to whine and bitch and complain. I mean, certainly I'm not happy about certain things that have been done now that I've become more and more aware and aware of the reasoning behind them. But let's get the truth out in the open, okay? And if if we out some people that gave up some people for adoption, or the parents send them off, good. Suffer the consequences of your goddamn actions. Because I suffer the consequences of your actions every day. That's my life. My life is the consequence of your actions. And I can tell you it's not a very great life to be adopted. So, at the very least, you grow up knowing you were given away by your family. And you can lie to yourself all you want. You can tell yourself any sorts of stories. You can wrap it up with the whole adoption agenda and propaganda. But the truth of the matter is, you were given away. And, you can look at children who were sold, private adoptions. And, my own daughter was almost sold for 10 grand. So, until someone's willing to admit right and wrong of things, the very basic premise of it, they're going to live in this ignorant blah 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 land. And I mean, that's the majority of people now. I don't expect a lot from them. I honestly don't, because people are depressed, and they have their television and their booze and their antidepressants and their drugs. And don't get me wrong, at this point in the game, we need those things. I mean, I don't think I'd be here today if it wasn't for booze and copious amounts of it and other drugs, trying to find a cocktail that worked for me. Because what have I been dealing with my whole life? When I go in to see the doctor and he asks about depression, well, I'm normal. I think normal for me is a clinical depression. Now, if I'm really depressed, well, then I'm thinking about suicide all the time, or murdering all of you, because, fuck, you drive me mental. Not you, my base, but the general ignorant populace that just doesn't really know what's going on, doesn't want to know, doesn't think about it, and is just self-centered, egotistical, narcissistic, and that's what we're pushing to our society. Why? It's good for the economy. So, I mean, I don't know what kind of sickness comes up with these sort of things, but I mean, we pretend with science and technology that we're at some sort of peak of civilization, and I look around, and I mean, we put our noses up at third world countries. Spiritually and morally, we are the third world country. We are the pit. We are the Kali Yuga. We are so far removed from our basic emotions, our basic reality of what is healthy and what feels good for ourselves, that we poison ourselves. That's our life. That poisoning ourselves is we've somehow been convinced that that's the path. So, like I said, I don't want to bitch and complain, but I do want to live in reality. I would like to live in reality, and sobering up and getting there myself, and being honest with myself, and being honest with what's going on. I've had to take some hard looks at myself. I've had to accept that I've been broken, and I'm not up to snuff, and I'm not up to par to survive the way I was going, and that there just wasn't enough booze and drugs to continue to keep me ignorant of how I felt about things, and to keep me quiet about the world I see around me. Um, and not only that, I mean, even though, as I mentioned, I've been saddled with the responsibility of my birth mother, the responsibility of my birth families, um, the responsibility of trying to let my adoptive family continue on in their ignorance that they somehow were, you know, altruistic in adopting me when no. I mean, that's just bullshit. I mean, my mother's sister and friends were having kids, and huh, you got to fit in with the people, right? So, I mean, at the end of the day, I mean, it was no different than an immature woman thinking that she can go get a Cabbage Patch doll. I mean, it was, it's a woman doing it and a little girl getting a dolly. What was the difference? Not a lot. So, anyways, hopefully that gives some perspective on things, because I don't want to point fingers. I want people to simply stop and make those connections for themselves. Um, and I want them to do it en masse, because we as adoptees need to start speaking up en masse. Because if we do not, it will be the adoption agencies who are speaking for us. And they are not, they have none of our interests at heart in any way, shape, or form. I mean, I'm sure there's some good ones in there, but I mean, if they're involved and they don't know what they're doing, and they don't know the dark side of adoption, then they shouldn't be doing what they're doing. But that's the people they want in there, because you certainly don't want people to make these connections when they're slave trafficking. It's the flesh trade. That's all it is. It's all it is at the end of the day. So, anyways, it wasn't quite my original video, and the whole ADD thing. And again, I'm not looking for justifications for my failings. I'm not looking for pity, this, that, and the other. But I am looking to educate people about the situation. And without admitting my own flaws and trying to make an amends for those things, at the same time, uh, looking for the source of some of my unconscious behaviors and attitudes. There's explanations as to why these things develop, and it's not unknown. And so, to get down to it, well, I need to tie my behaviorisms with my coping skills from my youth and my development, and that's all I'm doing, right? I'm saying, well, some of these things came from these sort of things, and then once I can accept that and I can try to incorporate that into my psyche, then hopefully I can resolve any of my negative behaviors that I don't want to continue on with. So I'm just trying to be a better person. I'm trying to grow, and I want other people to grow as well. And I want people to be educated, because the answer to all our problems in the world is education, not the one we're being given, which is propaganda, but true, honest education about our physicalities, our mentalities, our emotions, our psychology, our spirituality. These things are the important things in life. These things will unpack into all the other sciences and logic and reason. But these are the things that aren't taught to you in that core 12 years that you're being indoctrinated with facts and figures that they know if you're not going to use them, you'll lose them. And that's the simplest way I can put it. Thanks.